Welcome back to another episode of IB What's Going On podcast. I'm Arielle.
I'm Bhumi.
And I'm Heather.
This episode will be about Group 2 subjects, which is language acquisition, or more commonly known as mother tongue or ab initio subjects. So in Group 2, there are language B subjects consisting of either Chinese, Malay, or Tamil, at SL and HL, Spanish, Chinese, or French ab initio. But keep in mind that French is only offered in
Some schools.
some other schools. There are also language A subjects, which
Our friend has
yes.
kindly substituted some information for us, which we'll be covering.
Yes. So first of all, we will be covering Mother Tongue B, which is what I take. So basically, I take Chinese B at SL level, and so I'll talk about lessons first. So first of all, lessons, for me at least, have a lot of group work and presentations. So almost every other week or something like that, during normal lesson time, we will have presentations about anything
Global
and everything.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Chinese debate.
yeah, we had to do a Chinese debate once, which was rather manageable, but that was probably because I only had to record it. I didn't have to do it on the spot.
Right.
But yeah, and
I thought
that
some people
was-
had to do on a spot.
some people had to do it on the spot, and I'm so glad that wasn't me. Yes.
Just giving lit debate flashbacks,
Yes.
but in Chinese.
Yes,
Oh my
but
gosh.
Chinese B is the way that the teachers teach it is pretty similar to how it's taught in secondary school. It's just more group work and stuff. And IB doesn't have a textbook for us because Chinese in the whole IB is a kind of small subject. So my school just prints our own with combo practices and passages to read and questions to answer. Yes. And these things are mostly to prepare for oral. And the combo topics are also related to the chapters. For example, there was one chapter about culture, and one of the questions that I had to do was you and your friend went to watch a Chinese movie and the plot, and so you have to describe the plot and the way they incorporated Chinese culture and how it was very touching to you, and then they ask you to write a diary entry about it. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of
It's kind of making Chinese everyday, part of your everyday life, right?
Mm-hmm. And a lot of things that they teach us, a lot is related to China, and it's less related to Singapore, which was something that I wasn't very used to, because all this while all the Chinese curriculum that I've been having is all Singapore based, and all the emphasis and stuff previously was all related to Singapore. And some schools take their IB exam for Chinese in year 5, and some schools take it in year 6 with all the other subjects. Yes. Okay, wait. So now I'll talk about exam formats. So basically, you have paper 1 and paper 2. So paper 1 is the compo part, and paper 2 you have 2 components, which is listening compre and reading comprehension. Yes, so paper 1 is 实用文. So you have they will give you 3 questions, and under each question you have 3 choices of the format. So you have to decide of the format yourself. And then it's things like 日记, 电邮, letters, or 文章, or blog,
Social media posts,
yeah,
stuff like that.
Articles.
speech. So
Oh.
yes, yeah,
演讲. Oh.
演讲稿. Yes, I always write 日记because to me it's the easiest. But yeah, and it's out of 30, and yes,
Yeah, two texts, right? You have to write. Or is it just one?
no, it's just one.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
this one.
We have 1 hour 15 minutes for that, if I'm not wrong. Yes. And then paper 2, you have listening compre, which is quite simple, but you should know how to write like normal words. They're like basic words. Like in one of our tests we had to write shala. And then in the promos one we had to write luntun, which like everyone didn't know how to write.
Oh,
So,
was it the listening?
yeah.
Because I remembered, like, one of my friends was telling me about it, and it was like a word that apparently you're not expected to be able to write.
Yeah.
And, like,
London?
Yeah.
But isn't it just London?
Yeah, but I don't know how to write.
Okay. Anyway.
Yes.
Anyway. So,
And it's like a easy version of O-level English listening compre. And then the reading comprehension is like super easy. You can just like copy wholesale from the passage, and it's usually like one line, but you have like 3 passages, if I'm not wrong. Yes, 3
yeah, 3
passages.
types. Yeah.
And yeah. And for the oral, you have to choose from, I'm not sure whether it's 3 or 6 pictures, and then describe it. And it's kind of like primary school, but
Kind of like
on
primary school.
a bit of a higher level.
Yeah, that's like an
Yes.
understatement.
No, it's not a video anymore. You revert from video to picture.
But yeah, I think you missed out on part. It's like you have to link it
Yes.
to like global issues around the world.
Yes, it's not really like global issues. Like for IB Chinese, you have like, I can't remember how many, but it's a few like chapters that you have to learn, and then in like your paper 1, you have to link your compo that you're writing to one of these chapters and like bring it up. Like for example, one of the chapters is like 社会组织, which is basically like just societal like groups and stuff. So you have things like jobs, and you have like the 高考 in China, and these are things that you can talk about in your compo. And in your oral, they will also link, they will probably give like, I can't remember whether this is the like COVID thing, but I think I remember my 老师 talking about how they give like 1 picture per like issue, and then just pick one and talk about that. And then for paper 2 and both the compres, the passages will link to 1 issue. So yeah, you have to learn all the issues. Yes.
I think this is pretty much the same for like Malay and Tamil. Like you also have similar paper 1 and paper 2.
Yes.
Right? We don't have.
References is exactly the same,
Yeah.
just in a different language.
Yeah. So this is most likely what you will be taking if you come to IB. If you don't take higher mother tongue,
Yeah.
or you are not exempted from mother tongue, you might most likely will be taking your normal mother tongue, which for most people it's Chinese B.
Yes, and also some people say that it's like a guaranteed 7, but that is not true. You still have to like practice a lot of stuff. And also in paper 1, the 老师 will look out for all the like 成语 and everything.
All the good stuff.
Yeah, and for me who has not used 成语 in my compo since primary school, yeah, I needed to go like memorize all the 好字好句 and everything. Yes.
Yep. Okay. The next one we'll be covering is Chinese A. So there's a difference between Chinese A and Chinese B. This, unfortunately, our friend could not sit in to help us say, so we will just translate his experience over here. So Chinese A SL is an option under Group 1. So if you have listened to our previous episode, you would know that the Group 1 subject is basically your English. It's compulsory. So if you're taking a Chinese A, you will actually be replacing your Group 2 subject with that Group 1 subject. So our friend Jia Qi, he actually takes Langlit SL and Chinese A SL. So this would actually help to get a bilingual diploma in IB. But even though like you take Chinese B or like Spanish app or French app or Malay B, right? You technically don't have a bilingual diploma for IB unless you take like a Chinese literature.
It's only for A subject. Only if you take 2 A subjects.
Really? Oh.
Yes, I just googled it.
Oh, you just googled it. Okay. Well, so the difference is that Chinese A has a very similar syllabus to your Langlit and your English literature stuff. So the assessment for English literature applies to Chinese literature. So usually there's quite a few students in this class. For our school, we only have 3 people. Initially it was 4, but then one person apparently like chose not to continue it anymore. Since it's such a small number of students, right? Our friend told us that they get to choose their own text and they have a say in how the curriculum is being taught. So obviously, if you are considering Chinese A, you must have some experience in the Chinese language, and you must be skilled enough to be able to understand these texts, which unfortunately is not all of us.
Yes.
Yeah. It will be quite difficult, as he says, because it includes poems or plays written in the past, and the class involves a lot of essay writing, so you have to be able to articulate your thoughts. Our friend said that his classmate has good thoughts but is unable to put it into writing,
Yeah.
so that's an issue there. You need to know how to write well, so there's that caveat. You will also learn texts that are originally written in Chinese and translated into different works, which is very similar to Langlit. For us, we have like a book called Broken April, which was originally in Albanian.
Albanian,
Yes.
So there should be, for example, they learn poems by the Chinese poet Su Dongpo, with also translated works from the Thousand Splendid Suns. So because theirs is an SL class, they are not required to take a lot of like texts as compared to like HL literature, which is like 14 books, right? So
Oh my
there's
gosh.
yeah, 14 books.
13, I think.
13?
I can't remember.
Oh.
Somewhere around there.
But
It's a
any
lot.
more than 10 is not.
Yeah.
But for the Chinese ASL, they are only required to take 9 books, which is still a lot. Still a lot compared to our 4 books. Yeah. So their class is almost the same, on par with like Chinese B, I'd say, when you talk about learning culture and stuff like that. So for example, they would learn different motifs. They would learn different stuff that relates to Chinese literature in general. And he gave an example, the 成语香草美人, which symbolizes the qualities of 君子 or a nobleman. And he says, and I quote, "My own teacher is very well versed in all aspects of Chinese literature and the language itself, so being able to ask, think, and immediately clarify with a teacher like this in a small-sized class is really a precious opportunity for me," which is very cute. If you're listening to this, Jiaqi, okay. Yes, and they will learn, if I remember correctly, all kinds of different applications of these literature devices, I believe.
So it's basically like lit, just in Chinese.
Yeah, but
Is there any like aspect of Chinese literature that separates it from what you have in English literature? Like, is there anything particular?
There's probably a lot of like cultural aspects that they also learn that
yeah.
English literature doesn't really
Encompass.
have.
Yeah. Yeah. So he says it's cultural and historical knowledge is not really tested or a prerequisite, which is good, I think. If you have a love for Chinese, you know,
And the
I
culture
think,
itself.
yeah, and the culture itself. You really have to love Chinese and the text if you are considering taking Chinese ASL. I think it's natural for him because he's a scholar from China. Obviously, it's something that's much easier for him because he lives in China. He lived in China for a good part of his life. Yeah, but what else did you say? Yeah, you learn more about engaging with the text, and it will be focused on literature analysis, stuff you would learn in literature, like normal English literature or Langlit. And he says there's like, you have to have a certain interest in the culture and history of China to help with your understanding. He says it's necessary, which I think I agree a bit with, because if you are coming to take a language that at a literature level, it's more so than just understanding and being able to converse in that language. It's about understanding the reason, the syntax, the grammar, the culture is influencing
the
it.
underlying nuances in the language itself.
Yeah. So,
Oh yes. Also,
do take Chinese A if you like. If you take higher Chinese now in like secondary school and you consider taking Chinese literature in JC, maybe this is an option for you. Do some research, because unfortunately our friend isn't here to like give more on his perspective. But if you are really interested and you're considering, go look at videos online, you know? Ask people who you know or may have known.
Use Reddit.
I'm more of a Reddit user than you are, and you're advertising Reddit. Okay.
Yes, because I found that it has been helpful recently. Okay, so now we'll be moving on to the ab initio subjects, which both Heather and I happen to do, and we do Spanish ab initio. So basically, people who take ab initio languages are those who took a higher mother tongue in O-levels, and those who did not take a mother tongue in O-levels, and those who are unable to take their mother tongue in the school itself. So that'd be me, because I have done Hindi as my mother tongue all my life, but because it's not offered in school, I had to take Spanish ab initio, and I'm also doing Hindi A-levels outside.
Yes.
So essentially, the Spanish ab initio syllabus is pretty like similar. I feel like IB follows a set.
There's a set structure.
Languages.
Yeah.
So again, paper 1 will be like your writing skills. So you'll have like two texts to write in 1 hour, and
1 hour is for like our promos, but I think the actual piece, like I say, it's like 1 hour 30.
So we have to write. Is it still 2?
Is this understanding of 4 written texts? Wait, no, wait. We're looking at paper 1. Whoops. Okay, the one that is on writing, where we're supposed to write like an essay, is 1 hour, sorry. Yeah, it's two writing components, so that'll be 25 marks.
So again, they'll present you with like 3 scenarios, and then for each of the scenarios, they'll give you options for format. So after reading the question, you decide which format is appropriate, and then you write according to that. Paper 2 is your standard reading comprehension.
Yep.
So you just look into, I think, 4 to 5.
It says 4 here, so I think it might be 4.
Written text, and then you answer comprehension questions. Basically, this paper focuses a lot on language applications. You'll be looking at stuff like synonyms,
antonyms,
comprehension, and like general just.
You read, you understand, you write.
Right, that's it. Standard things.
If you read and you understand it, but you don't know the answer for it, you just use your basic knowledge, like how
use your basic knowledge. There are hacks your teacher's gonna give you along the way. Just
definitely.
use all of those into. And then paper 3 is listening. So this is
pretty new,
and it is the trickiest of them all so far, because so with a language like Spanish or any language in general, it's pretty widely spoken, not just in the home country that it comes from itself. So like there are different accents, and there are different ways that people who speak the same language pronounce the same word. So for example, we were doing like a practice in class once, and then we were listening to like a Spanish speaker from Spain. So for context, the word playas means beaches, and a Spanish speaker from Spain would pronounce it as playas, but a Spanish speaker from Argentina would pronounce it as playas. So when we heard that in the recording, we got confused. We were all so confused. And I asked my teacher, like, what is it the same word? And like, are we expected to know how it's pronounced in different like accents? And he was like, you don't need to know it, but you just need to have a rough sensing that like different Spanish speakers from different countries all speak it in different ways.
Yes.
And so the pace also varies very thickly. Also varies a lot. So some will go really fast, some will go really slow. Some accents are way thicker than others, so they become a bit difficult to understand. But I think for really nailing listening comprehension, you have to expose yourself. Podcasts, movies, music, and while you listen to those, you have to actively engage your brain. You basically, just saying like improving or like even doing listening comprehension is a process. You have to like get used to the language itself first before even beginning to do it on that level. So it takes time.
Yes, and also one thing that I forgot to mention was like in Chinese B you also have different accents. Like not that I've come across any, but I've heard like previously that they have like different accents, and like for our like exam, like for Chinese listening comprehension, we had like some mostly like Chinese, like Chinese accents. But like there was the last passage was said by our own like one teacher from our school.
Serious?
Yes, actually. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then also my friend told me that for her Malay paper, her listening compre, one of the passages was in an Indonesian accent. So like the way that they like pronounce words is like different, and the tone and stuff. And so her whole class was like struggling except for the Indonesian scholar. Which was
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Oh wait, I overheard like did Ananya say that the Tamil one also had a very strong accent?
No. The Tamil one had a completely different problem. There's like one till halfway.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. It was Bilkis who said that. Because like for their Malay, they had like apparently there's a lot of background noise in their audio, so they thought that they took it from like different news clippings or something. So everyone was super confused about their LC.
Yes, everybody who's walked out on Tuesday after the LC like, what the frick was that?
Yes. It's like what?
The ab initio students and like both the Spanish and the Chinese ab initio were like, whoa.
We just came out crying of gosh. Okay, so last part of any ab initio syllabus that you take is gonna be like your interactive skills. So typically so if you watch previous episodes, you know Langlet has a 10-minute IO, right?
Yeah.
But for Spanish or like any ab initio language, it's an oral exam, like kind of an oral exam.
Yeah,
it's not really like a
O-level Chinese oral, Chinese express oral, like maybe your normal oral in secondary
video?
school. No,
it's just like
the visual stimulus is a picture of it.
so
it's
same
like
as Chinese B.
It's like a primary school but higher level, quote unquote. And basically for this, you look at the picture and you describe it with whatever words or vocabulary you have. Your teacher follows up with questions, and then you just have a general conversation with the teacher or the examiner about
Whatever you are
about
talking
a global
about.
issue or whatever your conversation extrapolates to.
The global issues are going to be as complex as Langlet because obviously you're learning a new language. It'll probably be more on like culture, food, if you're going further into culture. If it's even more into culture, it'd be like music, dance, the arts, family maybe. So it's something simple, not super complex.
Yeah. So yes, for this I think the best way to practice is to just talk in Spanish as much as you can with your fellow classmates or friends who take Spanish. Personally, I don't really have family that speaks in Spanish. I know Heather does. Your sister took Spanish, so
there's an added advantage of having some help in Spanish or any ab initio language. So if you do consider taking this language, you do have to think, especially if you have a choice like me, whereas like Bhumi, she doesn't really have a choice, she has to take it. For me, when maybe taking like higher Chinese in secondary school, I could have just chose to take Chinese B like what Arielle did.
Yes.
But I chose not to because Chinese B is not that good. Yes. And also because I felt like learning a language was very worth that experience. Plus it was like a free education kind of thing. Like if I want to learn a language in university, I'll probably have to pay more, you know, or have to go to learning centers outside. Yeah. So there's also, obviously I wanted to do it, but it's going to be a process that's difficult for everybody, no matter where you stand in your linguistic ability. So having that extra help, if you know like your siblings, your family members, friends who took Spanish in university, or like the language that you plan to study in university, or you have friends in that country that speak that language, it's going to help because a language is not about just reading. Like what Bhumi said, it's listening, it's talking, it's
understanding and making it a part of yourself more than
yes,
just studying it.
yes,
And it's advantages in the sense that you get exposed to completely different cultures through languages, like what Heather said. When you go to university, if you're likely to go overseas, Spanish is a very widely spoken language,
Yes.
so you're more likely to be able to communicate with more people, even
Yes.
though you can overcome language barriers, which is what I think is very.
Oh, and Spanish also has like some variations, like Portuguese. I was watching my show yesterday, and it was dubbed in Portuguese because I couldn't find the English dub, and it was actually quite easy to understand some areas because they have very similar words that they use.
Okay.
So the question on whether you should take an ab initio language if you have the choice. If you don't have the choice, like Bhumi, she will cover like, you need to go for like Hindi
cover, like,
lessons,
hacks.
right?
Yeah.
You need to go for Hindi lessons on Saturday, right, and stuff like that. If you want to, yes, because it's worth it. Honestly, very worth it learning a new language. If you are weak in your linguistic ability, I would say no, because
Don't do it.
you are gonna cause yourself to be suffering more unless you have a
Yes.
very strong love for
Like
it.
me. Yes.
And you're also learning a new language from scratch, so you need to be studying like techniques, and you have to have some affinity with the language. You need to love it to be able to give it. You're not going to give yourself maximum exposure. You can't do that within 2 years. You're not going to be able to be fluent by the end of the school. Your learning school. I don't know what I'm saying,
Your learning journey.
yeah, your learning journey. So you may not be able to score well. So scoring a 7, whether or not that matters to you, is quite important. If you know that you can score a 7, I'll say go for it. And if you know that you can do it well, go for it. But if you are unsure of your abilities, you know that even if you take a higher Chinese language or a higher mother tongue language and you're not that well in, you've not tried to pick up a language before, you don't know how you fare in it, maybe go for Chinese B. Maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're like me and you don't have a choice in taking the language, first of all, when you're choosing your ab initio language, you need to keep in mind, like Heather said, about your linguistic abilities. For me, I do pick up things quite fast, but okay, so at the start of the year, I was debating between Spanish and Mandarin ab initio, right? I ultimately went with Spanish because it was like the writing's already in English
That's so true.
with like just a
Slight
few accents on
variations,
top, yeah. But in Chinese, it's a completely different like lexical that you have to learn, and I thought that would be extremely challenging for me personally. So that's also something to keep in mind. But if you really, really want to push yourself, I would say go for any language that you want. Okay, and as for managing A-levels with this, honestly, A-levels isn't that big of a priority when you come to IB because all you have to do is pass it.
Yeah, and plus your A-level mother tongue will be at the end of JC1.
Yeah, so
So-
that gets done and dusted with. But it's time consuming in the sense that you have to go to Hindi school on Saturdays, you spend like 4 hours of your morning there and you're like completely exhausted by the end of it. But it's worth it in the sense that you stay connected to your culture. Because for me, I spoke Hindi growing up. So honestly, for me, the language isn't that big of a challenge. But I know so many friends of mine who speak other Indian languages at home. So knowing their own language, like let's say Malayalam or Telugu or Bengali, and then having to learn Hindi and then having to do Spanish is a huge challenge, and which is why people generally find it a struggle to balance everything out. But just a bit of consistent studying for each language every week. Like typically what I do is I alternate days. So like every day of the week I make sure to do one language, whether it's Spanish or Hindi. And I generally switch it up between reading, listening, or watching something. I just do practices nearer to exams, and generally my grades are relatively stable.
Yeah.
So it's about balance, and then once your A-levels are over, you can just push that to the side because let's be honest, you don't really need to know how to write the language. You just know how to speak it, and that's enough for communication. At least that's what I find.
Yeah, A-level structure is
It's
very
relevant to
similar to the normal A-level JC structure, which is
Yeah.
mainly lectures. So that's that one thing. Last thing I wanted to cover before we go between A-level and Chinese, just briefly, level Chinese and IB Chinese, sorry. If you are considering taking an ab initio language because you took Chinese B, for example, in secondary school, not the Chinese B for IB, but like the Chinese B in Express, where you are already struggling in Chinese and you kind of don't want to continue with Chinese in JC, here's a word of advice before you make such a huge decision seriously. If you are already struggling in a language that is your mother tongue, you might need to consider your linguistic ability in picking up a new separate language because you're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
You don't have that foundation. Most people do not. And whether or not you think it's easier to pick up a new language, it entirely depends on the context in which you learn it. Our school is different from a lot of schools. Ab initio language is not taught the same in every part of the world because IB is an international curriculum. So do take the time to consider about your choices. Maybe it's better for you to take Chinese B in IB, or it may be better to take an ab initio language and take Chinese B for A levels. It's entirely up to you, but there are a lot of pros and cons to both decisions.
Yes.
Maybe I can share a bit about why I chose Chinese B.
Sure. Yeah. Yes.
So I took higher Chinese in O levels, and I could have taken Spanish ab initio when I came here, but I decided to take Chinese B because, first of all, Langlit was a big deciding factor because my Langlit is not very good. So like, if I took up a new language on top of Langlit, I would be like basically like struggling, like floating in the ocean with like rocks in my stomach.
Interesting analogy.
Yeah, and so and also because IB is not easy. So if for me who isn't very strong in my languages, if I took up a new language and I have to struggle for this plus all my other subjects, so like this would be like an added challenge. And I find that my Chinese abilities are pretty decent.
Yeah, if it's decent enough for you to score well, I guess it should.
Yeah, I think I would be better off and have a high chance of getting a 7 if I take Chinese B.
Okay, last part. A levels versus IB. What's the difference? A levels for their oral and their papers are all at the end of the year, I believe, or in the middle. Was it the middle? Or was it the
end?
And right?
It's like this year at the end.
Yeah. A level Chinese oral is basically your O level higher Chinese oral.
Yes.
Where you have a 10-minute time to prepare a speech that you have to complete within 2 minutes. And it's your koto bakao. So that's the difference. You finish it in 1 year for A levels and you have that added exam requirement that was applied for O level higher Chinese. For IB, depends from school to school. Some schools finish in year 5, some schools finish in year 6. Like ours, the O levels is different. So not O levels. The oral is different. The papers are a bit more different. That's the only main difference really. And for A levels, most people don't really care about the Chinese because they don't consider putting it into their aggregate score at the end for their RP. But for IB, you do need to put it in. So
yeah, everything's considered overall.
you need to do well.
Basically, okay, so ultimately I think we can round it up to when you're choosing your language or subject in whether IB or
A
A-levels, you ultimately need to consider what's best for you and what works for your language abilities, because you really don't want it to be a case where you struggle with your languages, because there's plenty of other stuff to struggle with during this period. And plenty of other stuff. Also, I think one thing, like one final tip is that knowing the culture in general really helps. So like, rewind. Okay, so knowing the culture really helps in the sense that the more you know, the more you'll easily be able to pick up and like understand the nuances of the language. So for me, I like reading about different like Spanish speaking countries and the different stuff they have to offer, and like different times I've read about like Peru, Argentina, Spain itself has a lot of different. It's in our textbook. I just read. I flip through those
the
pages.
textbook.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and Cuba and all of those have so many interesting things. So also teaches you a lot about the world. You develop cultural sensitivities as well, which
And that's what
very
IB is about.
Yeah.
Yes,
International social awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes.
Yes.
That's it. Nothing else to add, right?
Yep.
So thank you for coming to listen to another episode of IB What's Going On.
I think this is our last episode.
This is our last episode about subjects, and stay tuned for more other interesting topics.
You look at me like I know what's going on. No, I don't. Anyways. Okay.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.